Hi, everyone, and my name is Caitlin Nally. Thank you so much for coming to this virtual leadership university. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is the power of promises and the power of being able to keep them. So we'll go ahead and jump in. So, if we were in a huge setting, typically I do this presentation in person, but obviously since we've had to go virtual, we'll imagine that I am this man on stage giving this presentation. But um, if we were in a huge room full of hundreds of people and we were to ask, who in here has ever had a promise broken to them? Raise your hand. We would probably see just about every single hand in that room fly up. And same thing if we asked, okay, keep your hand up if you've ever broken a promise. Those hands would all stay up. We understand the pain and the heartbreak and the hurt that sometimes comes with, the disappointment of having a promise broken or having someone, not live up to the expectations that you kind of had for them. Um, and it's not just the disappointment or the feeling of being left behind with that promise. You know, when we break a promise, we destroy the humanity that holds our planet together. And I know that that sounds very luminous and dark and um, I mean, ominous, but I know that that sounds like, oh, there's no way. My tiny little promise, there's no way that, it's making such a big impact. But in reality of it, it is. Um, so, like, let's just imagine we live in a world where there are no broken promises, right? We have a clean slate full of people who have no broken promises. That's awesome. But when we start to break those little tiny promises, it might not seem like a big deal. If we can't keep small ones like, hey, I'm not going to be able to get lunch today. Hey, I know I said I would get that report into you by 4, but it's looking more like 6:30. Um, hey, I'm not going to be able to XYZ, whatever it might be. That's one thing. But those promises will continue to spiral out of control and continue to grow until it's huge promises like breaking of alliances, declaring war on one of our neighboring countries, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, if every single person on this planet breaks one tiny little promise a day, you are covered and surrounded by broken promises from everyone that you come in contact with. That leaves a lot of room for distrust. How are we going to be able to make a promise to make our community better if we can't even keep the promise to those in our lives who we talk to every single day, who we claim that we love? Where's the humanity in that? The thing that keeps the human race together is the fact that we can depend on each other and we rise up to the challenge when someone needs help. And if people can't rely on each other for that way or to keep their promise, then what's the point? It's only going to keep getting worse until something or someone is willing to change.
You don't have to be on this world for very long to understand the impact of a broken promise. It's not just the disappointment, it's not just the feeling of being left behind. The betterment of humanity itself is destroyed one broken promise at a time. It may not seem like a humanitarian issue at first, but think about it for a second. How is this world going to get any better if we can't keep our promises to make it better? Think about the people who you might know who say things like, I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to lose weight, I'll volunteer this year, I'm going to be there for my son. How often are these promises actually kept? We live in a society where I guess you don't have to keep your promises, right? Nobody else does, so why should I? Nothing about that attitude, nothing about that downward slide is going to change unless there is something to change it. And that is who we are.
So this dude named Alex Sheen, right? That's whose voice you heard in that last video. Basically, he was just a normal guy with a normal family and a normal dad. Um, and him and his dad had a kind of a pretty close relationship, you would say, but there was, still something that they weren't actually able to kind of fully connect their experiences. And one day, Alex was sitting in his room, and his dad came in his room and said, "Son, when I die, I need you to promise me to speak that you're going to speak at my funeral." And Alex said, yeah, of course, Dad. Of course I will. Why wouldn't I? Yeah, of course. And unfortunately, sometime later, Alex's dad did pass away. And Alex didn't have to keep that promise. He didn't have to get up and give that eulogy. It was obviously, a great opportunity to be able to reflect on his life, but at the same time, it's uncomfortable and it's heartbreaking to have to speak at a parent's funeral. Um, he described his dad in the speech as saying that, he was an average man. He worked a 9 to 5 job. He had no extraordinary talent, but he kept his promises. And that's what made the biggest difference in his life. Alex gave the final tribute of the eulogy by naming it Because I Said I Would. And he went ahead at the funeral and handed out these small little cards called promise cards to everyone in the audience to think about a time in their life or to think about a promise that they were going to make and that they were going to keep. And that card was supposed to serve as, a kind of sense of accountability with that. You have something physical. It's not just words anymore. It's a promise that you've written. It's a contract to yourself and to those around you. So I'll quit smoking. I will run a marathon. I will get the lawnmower fixed. So typically, oh, and by the way, I will be attaching a PDF to this so that you all, like I said, typically I do this in person, but I do have these cards for you to be able to, make your own promises. And even if you're just to write on a scrap piece of paper, if you're watching this, I want you to just take a second and just write down a promise that you want to make to yourself, to your sister, to your uncle, to your boss, whoever it might be, just a promise that you want to make. You're going to start going to the gym. You want to try eating healthier. You're not going to give yourself bangs, whatever it is. Just take a minute and write down that promise. All right. So I know what you're thinking. Sorry, I had to refresh where I was kind of in my template of things. I know what you're thinking. You can't even probably remember the last time that you made a promise. You might have promised your mom that you'd take out the trash or promised your boss that you'd get that in on time, like I said. But reality, we make promises every day when we show up. We make a promise when you join an organization. If you're seeing this video, chances are you're in at least one already. So when you joined that organization, if you joined a fraternity or you joined a band or you joined the club soccer team, whatever it is, when you join that organization, you're making a promise to show up and to be there and to be active and to give back. When you accept a job, same thing. You're holding yourself accountable and you're saying, I'm going to show up. I'm the best candidate for this and I'm going to prove you why, or prove to you why. When we go through job interviews, we say, I'm going to be the best candidate because I always have a good attitude, because I always get my work done on time. I'm always organized. And then it kind of, life hits. When you take a leadership position, so you're getting up and you're saying, I'm going to run things with a positive attitude. I'm going to make sure that I have all of the calendar dates set up. I'm going to make sure that I'm at every single meeting and I'm going to make this organization better. And also, just another example, when you enter into a relationship, this can be a friendship or this can be a dating relationship or a marriage or whatever it might be. But when you enter into something, it's not like you ever sit down and say, do you promise not to cheat on me? I do. Do you promise not to steal my money? I do. Do you promise not, you don't ever sit down and do that. But when something like that happens, you feel like your trust has been broken because it's that implied promise of, I'm going to do this, and you want to be able to trust that person. But when those promises get broken, so does that trust. And so it's so important, whether you realize it or not, when you go about your day-to-day life, you are making promises pretty much in every aspect of your life, whether that be professionally, personally, organizationally, whatever it might be. I found this quote on the internet. It didn't have a source and I could have Googled it, but I'm tired. But it says, people with good intentions make promises. People with good character keep them. And I think that that's kind of the drawing line of, it's so easy to make a promise to someone. It's so easy to say you're going to do something, but actually following through with it is a lot harder. And it's not like we're sitting there and we're saying like, gosh, I cannot wait to break this promise. I promise that I'm going to not do my homework on time and I'm going to gossip behind my friend's back, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I am not going to go to the gym, but I'm sure going to say that I am. So what kind of happens? Like, what gets in our way? Because it's not like we're trying to be malicious. What gets in our way of keeping our promises? So things happen, right? We're busy, we forget. Life happens. Other things become more important. You don't want to. Like Alex said, you don't have to. Someone else isn't doing it. They probably wouldn't do it for you. Maybe you don't have the resources, you don't have the energy or the time. Regardless of you might think that, oh, it won't really matter to them. They'll get over it. They won't be upset about it. And even if that other person might not say that they're upset, even if you promise to meet Laura out for her birthday for lunch, and then you break that promise and she says, oh, it's totally fine, no worries. Deep down, and she knows that hurt. And that was a broken promise. And I know that we can't keep every single promise that we make, but there are some things that we can do to try and eliminate that as much as possible. So the first step is to watch what promises you're making. Like I said, if you know that you have plans on Friday, don't tell someone else that you don't. If you know that you are going to be too stressed to get that task done, tell them that. Be able to ask for help, because it's so much easier. I know that it might hurt sometimes, but it's going to be so much easier in the long run to be able to ask for help and admit that you can't do it, and admit that you can't make something work now than later on when you've already disappointed someone and you've disappointed yourself. That's going to hurt so much worse in the long run. 2, realize the value of your words and actions as a leader. So, if you say, we've got to do better about this, but then you're not doing that, regardless if you are the president of an organization, if you are just the member, if you aren't even interested, you're in the audience, whatever it might be, realize that you being there matters, and you being there is contributing to something. And it's up to you to sit back and reflect and say, is this going to be a positive contribution or a negative contribution? Am I going to get up and do everything that I can to make sure that my time spent in this position is going to be beneficial? Or am I just going to kind of coast by and get busy and have it slip by me and do my best and keep my head down? Number 3, set goals. So by now you started keeping more track of the promises that you're making. But like I said, stuff happens. Life comes up. So, when you want to go get lunch with Laura, but you know that you have a paper due, set those goals and say, I'm going to finish this paper by 10 so that I can go meet Laura at 12. Set those goals and be intentional. So that way, both of those areas of your life are able to get filled, and, that can hopefully be avoided to some degree. Number 4, be intentional. Like I said, realize that the power of your word matters. The power of your actions matter. Um, be intentional with the way that you're talking to people, the words that you're saying to people, the promises that you're making with people. I know that something that I always think about is my sister, and it always just kind of brings up a lot of emotions with me. She's 2 years younger than me, and she's my best friend, and she won't ever tell anyone, but I know that I have been a big role model in her life, and that's a lot of pressure. And with me being her sister, that's me making a promise to look out for her, to care for her, to listen when she needs someone to listen to be there when she needs someone to come and advice to. And that's something that, for a few years while I was away at college, I kind of lost sight of. And when she was in Louisville and I wasn't, I just kind of assumed that she had everything on lockdown, and that, if she needed me, she would come to me. But that's not what that's not the promise that I made her. The promise that I made her was that I would be actively and intentionally checking in on her, seeing how she's doing, seeing if she needed anything, and making sure that she was doing okay. That's my sister, and that should have been a top priority in my life. And just because of everything else that was surface level, that was taking up so much of my time and energy, I was not able to fulfill that promise until I moved back. So if you are able to, even on the smallest scale, successfully complete some of these, it's going to cause a ripple effect, right? So you're going to make a promise to someone and recognize that you're doing that. You're going to try to keep that promise. That promise is fulfilled. That person is going to notice, and they might just go on to keep the next promise that they make to someone else. And that's going to continue to cause a ripple. And it might not the first time. They might just say like, oh, cool, I got met for lunch. But over time, they're going to see and they're going to see the value of having someone in your life that you can trust to be able to fulfill what they say they're going to.
No. The most important thing you can do for this cause is to be a person of your word. Contemplate your life. Look into your past, the world around you. Remember, there are promises that have not yet been kept. Remember the commitments that perhaps you still need to make. That is what is most important. Individual accountability, self-control. It starts with you. The world, it is in great need, and so you are needed. And when you fulfill that promise, when they ask you why you spent all of that time, when they ask you why you did it even when the tides turned against you, when they ask you why, remember where your promise came from. Remember why you started. You look them in the eye and you just say,
because I said I would.
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 So at this kind of point, we would typically open it up for some discussion, but I am going to kind of go ahead and wrap it up here. And I want you to just kind of take this presentation and to think about some things as you go. Um, you know, what does keeping a promise look like for you right now? Who's one person in your life that you want to keep a promise to? What's getting in the way of you keeping that promise to that person? What are you going to do about it? Why is that promise worth keeping? So I want you to kind of think about that for a few minutes, whatever you need to do. If you want to write about it, journal about it, talk about it, if you want to call me and tell me about it, whatever it might be. But just kind of at this point in your life, I want you to stop and take a breath and think about the promises that you're keeping. You know, you made a promise when you applied to NKU. You made a promise when you signed up and showed up for orientation that day. You made a promise when you got involved in that organization. You made a promise when you clicked on this PowerPoint, this, project, that you're going to do something because you said you would. And you clearly, kudos to you for even clicking on this presentation and wanting to learn how to grow and be a better leader. And so at this point, I want you to give yourself some credit because, like I said, you've made it through the end of this PowerPoint. And I appreciate you just joining in on this today. Um, and now I just kind of want to challenge you all to, you've thought about the promises that you've made, the promises that you want to keep to others, what's getting in the way, what you're going to do to stop them. And now I just challenge you to live out your promises simply and straightforwardly put, because you said you would.